These Nintendo Switch controllers do not drift. A couple weeks back, I reviewed this controller right here, the 8BitDo Ultimate Bluetooth controller, and something I neglected to mention back in that video is that among all of its features, one of the really notable ones is that it makes use of a new control stick sensor type that is unable to develop stick drift in the way that Switch Pro controllers, Switch Joy-Cons, and some third-party controllers are all capable of falling prey to. This is, however, not the first controller to offer this. That distinction actually belongs to the King Kong Pro 2 released by GullyKit earlier this year. Now, I did not get a chance to review this one back when it first released, but I have it in my hands now. And when the review video for this one went live, I had a lot of people asking me, well, which one's actually better to get, the 8BitDo Ultimate or the King Kong Pro 2? And it's really interesting to look at what these controllers have in common and what they don't. They are both $70 wireless Bluetooth controllers that can work across a number of different devices. They both have an Xbox-style layout as far as having offset sticks, and there are a number of special features that they have in common, but there are also a lot of special features that are unique to one or the other, and some fine bits about how each one handles that kind of makes one a little better for certain situations than the other. So I'm going to go over what's different about these, what I like about each one, what I don't like about them in comparison to each other, and which one's the right fit for you. I'm going to start by talking about the general control feel, button layout, and grip of these controllers. Again, both of these use an offset stick layout, and aside from some of the essential menu and special buttons, a lot of the general layout of these controllers are the same, but there are some fine-tuned bits about how they each control and handle that's a bit different. The 8BitDo Ultimate, for instance, is a little closer to a Switch Pro controller in terms of shaping. It's a little bit different, but I would say as far as a major OEM controller goes, that's about the closest you can get. Whereas the King Kong Pro 2 is, I don't know how else to say this, this is an Xbox One controller. Like, the actual body grip, shape, and design is the same as the Xbox One. I mean, even the coloration of this black one, where it has a silver finish for the stick bases and the shoulder buttons, very clearly evokes an Xbox Elite controller design. And that is exactly what it feels like to hold in terms of grip shaping. If you're a fan of the Xbox One controller and you like the way that it feels in your hands, this is that exact thing. Whereas the Ultimate is, again, a little closer to a Switch Pro controller. Now, I don't want to go over the nitty-gritty over every single button, how each one feels, but I want to highlight the areas where I think there are some important notable differences. For instance, the triggers on the controllers feel very different. The Ultimate controller has a longer trigger pull, it's very smooth, whereas the King Kong Pro 2's also extremely smooth, very gliding, a noticeably lower tension, and also a shorter trigger pull in general, so very easy to quickly rapid tap. If you like the feeling of more refined kind of pulls and something that I think is really useful in things like, say, racing games, the Ultimate feels better for that, but if you're just looking for fast, quick pulls and taps, maybe in a shooter, this fits a little more. Similarly, stick tension also has the same kind of difference. The sticks on the King Kong Pro 2 are just a little bit lower tension, so there's a slightly more loose feeling to them, not in a bad way, it just takes less force to move the stick around. I think one other important thing to point out about this is that the no friction rings on the King Kong Pro 2 are excellent. I mean, I really don't feel friction at all. Whereas the Ultimate controller doesn't really have non-friction rings, but it is still a very low friction experience. I have used controllers that have way more noticeable grinding when you're spinning the stick around, but comparing these side by side, the King Kong does have less friction. I also want to talk real quick about the D-pad. Both of them are actually great. I've used a lot of controllers with worse D-pads than these two, but in a direct runoff, I do like the Ultimates a little more. D-pad is just one of the ongoing big strengths that 8BitDo has had time and time again. The D-pad on it is just a little bit bigger than the one with King Kong. I really like the feeling of it. Again, both of them are excellent, but if you want to go for the one that I think has the better D-pad experience, Ultimate wins there. The front shoulder buttons on these, the L and R buttons, also handle differently, with the King Kong controller having a click back, which I'm a big fan of. I really like clicky buttons on my controllers, so I appreciate that on here. Whereas the Ultimate is a more traditional softer touch button that feels very similar to what it would be like to use them on the official Switch Pro controller. So overall, there's a little bit of give and take in terms of what I think each one excels at as far as the buttons and sticks go. Features are where things get really interesting, especially in terms of how they tackle customization. The Ultimate controller, as I covered back in my full review, relies on 8BitDo's phone app. You can get it for Android or iOS, and allows you to connect to the controller wirelessly and do all your customization right there. You can do things like adjusting stick sensitivity, trigger sensitivity, the intensity of the rumble motors, as well as remapping all of the buttons. Most importantly, the pair of additional buttons that are on the back here that you can basically just freely remap whatever you want to have on the back. The King Kong, on the other hand, relies on a more traditional on-board customization approach, where you don't use any kind of app, everything can be done directly on the controller itself, you don't have to make use of any other external device, and it's all done with this little gear button right here. There's a full instruction setup that you kind of have to memorize to really make full use of it, which is a little bit of an upfront hassle, but it is really nice that if you want to adjust different things, you can do it all right there on the controller really quickly without having to do anything else. For instance, if you want to adjust the rumble motors, you hold this button and press up and down on the D-pad. Or if you want to adjust the sensitivity of using gyro controls, you hold this button and then do left and right on the D-pad. You can do a turbo feature by holding down this button and pressing one of the front-facing ones or the triggers that you want to activate for it. There's a whole bunch of different customizable features you can do right here on board with this single button. In terms of one that is missing compared to the competition, there is no remapping on this. You cannot change what each button does. There are no additional buttons to make use of as well. So if controller level remapping is a thing that is important to you, this doesn't do that. There are a lot of games out there that give you the ability to remap in-game, so it isn't necessarily a completely lost feature. It's just not one that gives you quite as much granular control and additional options as the Ultimate is going to have. One interesting trade-off that's in the King Kong's favor is whenever I think of official Switch Pro Controller features, there's really three big ones that you sometimes lose out on other controllers, and that's HD Rumble, gyro controls, and an NFC reader for Amiibo. Both of these offer gyro controls, though the King Kong does give you the ability to customize the sensitivity of that feature. Both these controllers do not have HD Rumble and instead offer their own rumble motors, which overall I think both feel pretty fine. Both of them give the ability to adjust the intensity on them. However, when it comes to an NFC reader, completely absent on the Ultimate controller and present on the King Kong. They do actually specify that there are some specific Amiibo that use a different kind of sensor that will not work with the King Kong, but the majority of released ones will read and work just fine. Generally speaking, I've never thought of losing the NFC reader as that big of a deal because you likely at least have a Joy-Con around with your Switch to still make use of that function, but still having it on the main controller you use all the time is a nice handy feature so you don't have to go out of your way to grab one. Now, while I'm generally more focused on how both these controllers act as Switch controllers, again, both of them can work across a variety of different devices, and the way they tackle that is also different. The 8BitDo Ultimate in particular relies on a separate 2.4 gigahertz dongle that you can use with a PC or Mac if you wanted to, whereas the Bluetooth is focused on Switch use, whereas the King Kong Pro 2 relies on Bluetooth for across all of those different devices and is handled by just pressing a button on the top right here. If you like the idea of using a 2.4 gigahertz dongle, there actually is an option for that on the King Kong as well, but it is a sold separately accessory rather than something that is bundled in like with the Ultimate. The Ultimate does also include a charge stand, which gives you an easy way of charging it all the time, because instead of having to plug it into something, you can just lay it on the cradle and call it a day. One of my favorite dumb little features of this is that the cradle also acts as a place to plug in the 2.4 gigahertz dongle, so that's a really nice all-in-one way of approaching that. One of the interesting side features of the King Kong, though, is that the front-facing buttons are designed to be easily removable just by basically using a pair of clamps to tug them out. You might be wondering why you would ever want to do that. Well, that has to do with the fact that, again, this isn't just for Switch, it can work on different devices. And if you've ever used a Switch controller on a PC, you'll immediately realize how confusing it can sometimes be when a game says press X, and it doesn't actually match up with the X on your controller. It's all shifted around. So if you like swapping between those platforms a lot and you need the buttons to actually show and reflect what is being said in-game for that layout, this gives you the ability to swap those around. This one, you're just gonna have to rely on, well, remembering that they are shifted when using it on a non-Switch system. Both of these are wonderful alternatives to the official Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, which, honestly, I'm still a fan of, and I think is worth considering for some people still. In terms of the major gains and losses there, Switch Pro Controllers go for the same MSRP of $70, though it's not that hard to find them for cheaper if you're getting just a basic design and not a special edition one. Special edition designs, if you don't get them at launch, gonna go a little higher over time, but that is one of the kind of potential upsides of it, is that there are special edition options out there if you want to celebrate a particular game. I also think there is a certain warm and fuzzy feeling that some people get from having first-party official controllers, especially when compared to something that in these cases are not even licensed by Nintendo, part of the way that they're able to keep their price down a little bit. These are not things that Nintendo officially recognize, like say controllers you can get from Hori or PowerA, and if that's important to you, that is a trade-off to keep in mind. Really, the biggest feature loss though is HD Rumble. Depending on the games you play and stuff that you like to play, and if you enjoy that kind of feedback that games have, there are a number of titles out there that have really nice refined rumble settings on official Switch Pro Controller that you're not going to get with these. These just have more traditional rumble motors, and yeah, you're going to get that more traditional rumble feedback, but it's not going to be the same kind of refined rumble that the official Switch Pro Controller has, and some games are intentionally trying to take advantage of. All that said, aside from their other special features, the one big reason why you might want to grab one of these instead of that Pro Controller is, again, stick drift. While that is an issue that has existed across numerous controllers over time, it is not unique to the Switch. It has been a lot more common on Joy-Cons and Switch Pro Controllers given the type of modules that Nintendo makes use of, and so the fact that these are moving over to a new form of stick technology that avoids that issue is a really tempting reason to grab one instead. Now, as far as which one of these I recommend more, honestly, I really do think that their individual strengths are different enough that depending on the kind of games you play and what you're looking for special feature-wise, they each have some nice bonuses. For instance, the shorter pull triggers, mechanical shoulder buttons, and the smoother sticks can be really nice for a lot of shooters. However, in that same instance, having an additional pair of remappable back buttons on the Ultimate is really nice to have. I will say for my own personal use, currently, I do like the Ultimate more. I like having a pair of remappable back buttons. It's just a feature that I really wish even mainline OEM controllers would start to ship with regularly. So I love having that on the back there. And I really enjoy the fact that it comes with a charge stand at no additional cost, giving me a much simpler way of making sure my controller stays charged. That said, that is my personal preference. I think there are a lot of great reasons to grab the King Kong instead, depending on your personal use cases and what features are more important to you. So those are my thoughts on these two main drift-free Switch Pro Controllers that are out right now. If you're interested in grabbing either one, I do have links posted down below in the description. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit thumbs up button to let me know, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys later.